All right, boys and girls, so I want to do a little bit of a review before we actually start the next lesson. So I want you to think way back to when we were still in school and we were talking about different strategies for addition. And I know that a lot of us are comfortable with the standard algorithm for addition, which would be right here, okay? And then we were also introduced to one that you may not be as familiar with or that you weren't as familiar with, yet you became familiar with and you ended up liking it, which was the give and take method, which, if you remember correctly, if you're looking at 48 plus 26, you can see that 48 is very close to 50. So if I take 2 from the 26 and I give it to the 48, then I end up with that solid number of 50. And then from there, I'm able to give from the 26 to the 48, and then I end up with 50 plus 24, which is much easier to add than 48 plus 26. And I have a nice 74. So if you want to look at that a little more closely, 48 plus 2 more gives me 50, plus 24 more gives me 74, okay? And then we had another algorithm that we talked about a little bit as well called the split them all up. So if you just simply split up the 48 with the 10s and the 1s, you have 40 and 8. And then you split up the 26 with 10s and 1s, you end up with 20 and 6. And then from there, you add up your 10s. 40 plus 20 equals 60. Then you add up your 1s. 8 plus 6 equals 14, and altogether you have 74. So here are 3 of the strategies that we talked about before we ended up finishing our Module 1 from Unit 4. So before we go into Module 2, I just wanted to review these with you before you forgot them, because Module 2 is all about subtraction and different strategies, but you will hear that, I bring a couple of them up as we're going along. So I'm going to go ahead on to the next slide now. So you probably remember these as well. So this slide is actually one from one of the lessons that we did before. So it says, let's look at some of our addition strategies that we've been talking about. Can you think of any alternative strategies? So you don't really need to think of alternative strategies right now, but I just wanted to refresh your memory on some of the ones we did talk about before break and all that kind of stuff. So Steve and Rosa's get to a friendly number method, which I know some of you were not as excited about. So from 275, if I want to get to a friendly number, I can get to 300. And then from there, so we were adding 158 plus 275 is what we were doing. So in all of these problems, that's what we're doing. And here, if you start with that 275 and you need to add that 158, you can start by getting 275 to a friendly number of 300, okay? And then by adding 25, and then you still need to get to another 100, so you add that 100, and then you just keep adding, so 100, 25, 35, 45, 55, 56, 57, 58, to end up with that 433. So getting to that friendly number was how that one went, okay? Now let me refresh your memory on the give and take again. I actually just talked about this one, but if I've got 158 plus 275. If I just simply give 25 to the 275, I get myself to a nice solid 300, nice base number there. And then it's much easier to add 133 to it to end up with 433. So again, 275 plus 25. So it's very similar to the get to a friendly number, but a little bit different. And then instead of splitting all of these up here, I'm simply just adding the 133, and there I have 433. So there's that one. Now if I go to the Daryl and Lynn's start with the ones method, okay, it's very similar to the standard algorithm, all right, where I just simply start with the ones. 8 plus 5 is 13. You have more than 10 in the 13, so 13 over to the tens column, as you can see. So you've got that 1 over there, but the 3 stays there, right? And then you have 10 plus the 50 plus the 70, which gives you 130. So that's where the 100 and the 3, and then obviously the 0 comes from. And then you have 100 plus 100 plus 200, which gets you the 400. So that's where you get the 433. Very similar to the standard algorithm that we are all very used to, all right? And then finally, we have Jamal and Sabrina's split everything up method, which is basically putting it into that expanded form, if you will, all right? So split everything up is simply the expanded form, where I am taking 158 and I'm expanding into 150 and 8, and I'm taking my 275 and doing the same thing, 270 and 5, adding my hundreds, adding my tens, adding my ones. Okay, I end up with 433. So I just wanted to go over those various strategies that we talked about before we ended up having to go home from school and things like that before we actually start our next lesson. So thank you so much for listening, and be ready to flip over to the next lesson. Thanks a lot.